Welcome all to this exciting session of Sattology with Professor Makarand Paranjape. He is the director of Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla, and he's a he's a wonderful friend. I got to know him recently, but I connected with him heart to heart. I follow what he says, I understand what he says, and it's a great honor to have him on this show. And based on his time, he's a very busy person. Based on his time, we'll request him frequently to come and talk on specific issues that he wants to cover, to tell you, or he wants us to cover specific series with him. So without delay, I bring on to you Professor Makarand Paranjape. Namaskar, Professor.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
It's an honor. When I saw your profile and what we do, we are very academic. We don't make any political suggestions or anything. But surprisingly, politicians are listening to us. So just yesterday, day before yesterday, we had Brian Marriott, the U.S. congressman, on the call, on the session. And yesterday, Kailash Vijayvargiya from India joined. And last week was Ram Madhav. Even though we are not trying to get into that sphere, our focus is on students and academics. So given your profile and what you have done, so number one, before I start ask you any question, why don't you tell us that what inspires you in your life?
See, just the other day, I was in a dialogue on Shankaracharya. And, the person conducting the dialogue said that, what is Shankara's message for the youth today? And, I was put on a spot, so to speak, because I had not thought about it. And then suddenly I said, the message is very simple. Know yourself, know the world, and knowing both, serve and save the world.
Right.
So that is what inspires me. Knowing myself inspires me. Knowing the world inspires me. Trying to serve the world and also myself, because I also want moksha, whatever you want to call it. And then serving, and so saving myself, saving the world, serving the world. These are the things that really move and inspire me. And other than that, on a more mundane plane, it's basically, what do? We read, we write, we walk, and we talk. That's all I do. I think if someone were to ask me, what do I do with my life? That's all I do. I read, I write, I talk, and I walk. I love to walk. And as you know, walking means, it's a metaphor. Walking means so many things.
That's right.
Chareti. Keep going, keep striving for the absolute whatever. It also means you walk, you travel, you roam around the world. I think I must have been to maybe at least 60, 70 countries, and actually spoken there, and met students and lectured and done seminars. So, I mean, this is what moves me, basically. That's my life. I have nothing else.
Very, very inspiring. Very inspiring. And I think the students and the viewers of this show, if they search you out on internet, then they will see everything what you have done. You are a poet, you're a writer, you're a thinker, you're a leader, you're an academic personality, and a huge name in many places, including big organizations in India. They follow you. So coming to a more related question, which is pertaining to people following Sanatan Dharma, or colloquially called Hindus, but following people who follow Sanatan Dharma. So, what is their core belief according to you?
Well, this is such a fascinating question. I tell you, Aditya ji, we could spend many sessions just talking about what we believe. But let me just start with something I thought of just this morning. I was in a sort of debate, online debate with some friends on this very question. And I said, look at the amazing, astonishing paradox that is Sanatana Dharma, Sanatana tradition or Hinduism. See, we believe in not one God, not one book, not one prophet, not one dogma, not one doctrine, not one point of origin, not one point of closure. Now think about it. Not one, not one, not one. So rather than saying that, we are polytheists or whatever people have tried to call us in the past, I say we are not monothetical, okay? And some people say monist. I think all those are wrong. But anyhow, we are radically not monothetical, not one, not one. And yet, in a way, our greatest contribution to world metaphysics, thought, philosophy is not two, not non-dualism, Advaita. So the Vedanta of what we are so proud, even if you call it Bhakti Vedanta of Prabhupada, ultimately it is a thing of saying not two. So on the one hand, we are not one this, not one that, not one book, not one prophet, etc., not one dogma, not one church, not one guru, many. We are always in a sense radically pluralistic. And yet, when it comes to our core belief, it's always not two. It's always Advaita or Advaya. And when I went to Vrindavan, I'll tell you a very interesting experience. One of the Goswamis, in the ancient lineage of Srila Rupa Goswami, that lineage, that great lineage when Mahaprabhu sent his disciples, in the heart of the Mughal country. Just think about it. It's unimaginable. Here is Agra on the one side, here is Delhi on the other side. And there's no trace, there's not one major Hindu temple left in North India. And there, Chaitanya is sending, these great Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, etc. Anyhow, so one of those descendants of the Goswamis. So we were driving into Vrindavan, and finally we reached his beautiful ashram, etc., etc. And then he said, like, how was it? I said, Maharaj, we were really getting scared. So he said, why? So I said, the lanes were getting narrower and narrower, and we were in a largish car, and there were moments when I said, we are going to get stuck, and so I was with somebody, at that time, and so both of us were going, for a pilgrimage. And then he looked at me, and he quoted. He says, "Prem ki gali ati sankadi, isme dui na samai." So he says, as you go closer, as you traverse or as you progress on the path of love, the lane of love, as it were, the highway of love becomes narrower and narrower. And in the end, there's no room for two, there's only one. So the beauty of Advaya, in the Vaishnava tradition is that Radha and Krishna are the living embodiments of this Advaita that, let us say, Shankara talked about. So anyhow, so what I'm trying to say is this: not one, not one, not one, and then suddenly you say not two, and you say ekam advityam. What is the nature of consciousness? Ekam advityam, the same thing. Isha vasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyan jagat. So everything is pervaded by this one consciousness, oneness. And yet we are saying not one, not one. So this is the amazing paradox of what we believe. But, let me answer your question in a slightly more, what should I say, a way that modern people, contemporary people might relate to. I just finished a book on Swami Vivekananda. It was called Swami Vivekananda, Hinduism and India's Road to Modernity. And I came across a very interesting incident. If you allow me, I'll just tell you a little bit
Please,
about it.
please share.
So you see, what happened is Swamiji came to America in 1893. He made his debut at the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago on 9/11. Just think about it, that 9/11 and then the other 9/11 in 2001, when the jetliners crashed into the Twin Towers. I was, in fact, in the US. I was teaching in a small university in Indiana at that time. But anyhow, I had to go to class, and the first thing that the president of the university had flashed on the screens in each class is, please console everybody, have a prayer, etc. So that's the first thing I did. I said, let's be quiet, and let's concentrate. If we have disturbed thoughts in our mind, let's get rid of them. Let's pray for those who might have been injured or who might have died in this. And then I slowly opened up. I said, I hope and that none of you has lost, etc., any loved ones and so forth. So these are two 9/11s. But my incident is not about that. My incident, thing I'm trying to tell you is really, and our viewers, is really, so Swamiji was in America. And before he was in America, he went to Chennai. And there a band of young people were very enthused by Swamiji. One of them was a chap called Alasinga Perumal. Another one, his name was, if I remember right, um, Shringaravelu Murugan. No, Shringaravelu Mudalayar, sorry. Shringaravelu Mudalayar. So Velu refers to the spear of Lord Muruga, and Shringaravelu is his name, Singaravelu. Anyhow, Singaravelu Mudalayar. And his pet name was Kidi. Now, Kidi is writing to Swamiji. Now, let's remember, Swamiji doesn't come back to India till 1897, if I'm not mistaken. And on the 1st of May in 1897, he starts the Ramakrishna mission. And what is the motto of the mission? You ask, what do we believe in? It's a beautiful motto. He says, Atma Mokshartham Jagat Hitayacha. And so, for my own liberation and the benefit of the world, this is why we work, this is why we strive. That is the motto of the Ramakrishna mission. And it, of course, comes from the Rig Veda. We leave that aside. But I'm talking about a time before the Ramakrishna mission was founded. But he had these young men and, young people who were enthused and wanted to do something for India and for reawakening Bharat. So Kidi writes to him. He's saying, look, we are going around and we are talking about the stuff you're telling us, but, young people, and he was in a really radical sort of college called Pachaipas College, which was all into anti-Brahmanism and all that at that time. Anyhow, so Kidi writes to Swamiji saying, what is it that we believe in? If I meet people, what am I going to tell them about, what is it we're trying to do? And this was actually on Swamiji's mind as he was touring America, okay? Because everywhere, people were asking him that, what is it you guys believe in? You call yourselves Hindus, this, that. What do you stand for? And this is what he said. And I'll just quote him, just 2 minutes. So he says, we reject none, neither theist nor pantheist, monoist, monist, polytheist, agnostic, nor atheist. The only condition of being a disciple is modeling a character at once the broadest and the most intense. Nor do we insist upon a particular code of morality as to conduct or character or eating and drinking, except so far as it injures others. Whatever retards the onward progress or helps the downward fall is vice. Whatever helps in coming up and becoming harmonized is virtue. We leave everybody free to know, select, and follow whatever suits and helps him. So, then we believe that every being is divine, is God. Every soul is a sun covered with clouds of ignorance. The difference between soul and soul is owing to the difference in the density of the layers of the clouds. We believe this is the conscious or unconscious basis of all religions. The same spirit is manifesting through different planes. We believe that this is the essence of the Vedas. We believe that it is the duty of every soul to treat, think of, and behave to other souls as such, i.e., as gods. So let me tell you one last thing before I want to hear you also on what we believe. But when I first came in contact with the great tradition of Prabhupada, I went to a temple, and then we sat down, we had prasad, and then I found everybody was addressing everybody as Prabhuji. Prabhuji means Lord. So he said, Prabhuji, please give me some more vegetables. No, Prabhuji, we are running out of rice here, bring the rice. And then when I got into the temple, I found that the guards, security guards, because everywhere there's security now. So they were saying, "Oh, Prabhuji, Prabhuji, welcome. Put your bag through the scanner." Then somebody from the back was, how India people push and they get very. This is before social distancing, so everybody's pushing to get into the temple. They're about to open the curtains. So somebody's pushing, and then someone in the front, Prabhuji, why are you pushing? Be patient. And it was, the guy cleaning was also Prabhuji, the guy serving was Prabhuji, and I saw the image. So what I'm trying to say is this is what Vivekananda says that in Hinduism, we treat everybody as if they are actually God. God is inside them, and we have to awaken that spirit. So, to conclude, what I'm trying to say is Hindus actually have so much freedom of belief, okay? And why is freedom important? Sri Aurobindo put it very well. He says that the greatest precondition of evolution is freedom. So I think Hinduism gives you so much freedom, which has been encapsulated in the great statement of both the unity of truth and the plurality of expressions, ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti, which means that, so we are not into the relativism of the postmodernists, which means anything is true, anything goes. No, we believe in the unity of truth. So truth is not a fragment, my fragment versus your fragment. No,
That's
we
right.
believe in the oneness of truth, but yet we are free to, as many. So what I wanted to say is, how many Ishta Devatas are there? There's said to be 330 crore Ishta Devata. Some say 33 crores. Ishta Devata means your favorite deity. But you can apply it also, to your favorite understanding, motto, vision, version of the divinity. And you can believe in that and still be a Hindu. So the freedom of belief, the pluralism, the openness, that is what to me characterizes Sanatana Dharma. And I'll say one more little thing. But that doesn't mean Sanatana Dharma is anything to anybody. Basically, there are certain key concepts like the pillars of Sanatana Dharma. For example, we've always said dharma. So dharma is very important. Karma is important. And the purusharthas are important, right? So, the pursuit of wealth and power, karma, pleasure, whatever you want to call it, arts, beauty, all of that has to be in a framework of dharma, which is righteousness, virtue. It has many, many names. And moksha. Moksha means liberation, freedom from suffering. And I think this is what we believe.
What a wonderful answer, and you covered a lot. I don't have to ask you any question anywhere right now. One point I want to come to, and you can guide us, is there is a tag of, so if you study South American continent, and 1492 Christopher Columbus landed on Cat Island, which is in Bahama. I actually went there and saw the place, and from there, I met uh, the Siwawan, the community which was there, and only one member is left now in the entire place. and that too his religion is not the old what they used to follow. He's a Christian. And so what happened was, now in next 400 years, and just to let you know, before 1492, South America had a very good trade with India directly through the oceans, and the now what is remaining is, I went to Brazil, I went to many other countries there. Their entire ancient culture is in the museum, and their religion is branded as mythology. So that's the tag has been put. So, so my question to you is very clearly is that we have been attacked, not just we, Incas, Aztecs, Mayans, Sumerians, all of them have been attacked with a mythology tag. So how do we counter that? And Sattology is an answer, but according to you,
I was just going to say that you have the answer. You've created this idea of Sattology, Sat meaning what is the truth. Uh, it's a very deep question because what we call today myths and all that, as a kind of pejorative, meaning, mithya. In fact, it's got a very interesting cognate in the Indo European languages. In Sanskrit, we say mithya as opposed to satya. Now, this kind of opposition, if you go into it very deeply, even the Greeks, ancient Greeks, were going through this. So, their old so called law books, like what we call our Smriti, our Puranas. Human beings used to live not necessarily by the kinds of modern constitutions that, we now follow, the legal systems and so forth, but a commonly understood way of life was codified often in great poems, great epics. And these contain the truths that generations of, enlightened ancestors had left behind. So the Greeks wrestled with this long ago. And there was a shift when you come to Plato from mythos to logos. This is a very interesting shift in the history of Western philosophy or Western thought or Western civilization. Because what they were trying to say is, oh, the stories of Homer, like Iliad and Odyssey, and before him, Hesiod. So Hesiod is the older kind of figure. Oh, these are just stories, these are myths, But we are going to found our philosophy in, more, what should I say, reliable epistemology, which is logos. And what did the Christians do? The Christians, let's say they have their own, I would say, myths, stories, legends. Look at the Old Testament, Adam and Eve and the creation, the story of Abraham, which is the most important story in their entire tradition, how Abraham sacrificed. Even today we commemorate it. But we don't know if Abraham ever lived. We have no historic proof of Abraham. And yet, there is so much of an urge to prove that somebody like that lived. So when I went to the Topkapi Museum in Istanbul, because Istanbul was the caliphate, okay? And till the end of the First World War, 1919, the First World War ended. 1920, the British got rid of the Khalifa. Now, but if you go there, you'll be amazed to see in that museum, objects which they claim belong to these ancient prophets of that, Abrahamic tradition. For example, the staff of Moses. Remember, Moses was supposed to have a staff. If you remember, he stood up to the Pharaoh.
that's right.
They've got the staff of Moses. They've got, objects supposedly belonging to Jesus, Abraham. They've all got those in that museum, claiming those are genuine. Now, if you did carbon dating, of course, but you can't because it's your belief. Similarly, the Turin Shroud, people used to fight wars over these things in Christendom. That we have the cloak of Jesus, or we have the, the Holy Grail. So it's not that only Hindus, even all traditions. I mean, for example, Islam, they have a belief that that the Prophet Muhammad, on the night of Miraj, on a white horse from the dome, where the mosque, where the, Church of Jerusalem, on the mosque, from that dome, I mean, he flew in a white horse to heaven, and he came back. Now, is this a truth or is it a myth? So my point is that most human cultures, are full of myths. Now, look at Superman, you know. Now, everybody knows the Man of Steel, or even Iron Man, all these Marvel characters, they're so popular. But these are modern myths. In other words, what I'm trying to simply say is that it's not as if only Hindus or the Incas or the Aztecs have myths. In fact, like you, I was in Guadalajara some time ago, and I went to a pyramid, and it was an extraordinary experience there. It was all round, and they had some ancient form of connecting with the divine, and the connection between the earth and the sky, like in the pyramids in Egypt. So there was some common faith system all over the world, as I see it, and we have it in the Vedas, which means, very simply speaking, there is the human world, but the human world is not autonomous. The human world exists in a bigger world, which is the natural world, right? So that's the second tier of our reality.
Exactly.
And then there is another tier, the supernatural world, the world of the gods, call it that. So all the ancient people were wanting to connect the world of the humans with the world of nature and the world of gods. And they believed that if these were in harmony, you could create a stable, prosperous, ideal society made up of, highly enlightened, evolved human beings. So all the ancient people had similar beliefs. That's what I'm saying. Now the modern people jump in and say, "Oh, those are myths, and we are going to tell you the truth, which is historical, verifiable." But hey, this was an old debate which the Greeks had, 2,500 years ago, and 2,500 years ago they said, "We are leaving the myths behind. We are getting into logos, and that logy that you've put, mythology, sattology, psychology, phenomenology, whatever these biology, all the logies come from logos, which means a rational, systematic study of something." So when the Christians discovered, I mean, not discovered, but they obviously took over the Greek ideas and texts, and Aristotle was the most influential philosopher for the Christians for about 1,000 years. So what do? They said Christ himself is logos because he's the word made flesh. Now, if this is not a myth, what is it? It is a belief. It is like a powerful idea that God has incarnated and taken human flesh, etc., etc. So, to answer your question, I want to say, look at the Hindus. They don't call their ancient texts myths. They say itihas. And
Right.
itihas means, so it happened. This is what happened.
Correct.
Now, it is the truth. But now let's understand, what do we mean by truth? See, there are different kinds of truths. Okay. So one kind of truth is 2 plus 2 is equal to 4.
Four.
Now, usually in most practical, not just mathematical, but financial, all these other realms, domains, this is a truth. 2 plus 2 is going to be 4. You punch it into any computer, any calculator in the world, any part of the world, regardless of day or night, China or Peru, India or United States, Timbuktu, wherever you go, 2 plus 2 is going to be 4. So that's one kind of truth, right? But there are more complicated ideas of truth. For example, now we believe that Hanuman, could increase his size, could decrease his size. He jumped across the ocean. He went to Sri Lanka, right? When Ram and Lakshman were, you might say, in a kind of state of coma because of the poisonous arrows of Meghnad. He not he needed he had to bring not Ram but Lakshman. He saved him. He had to get the Sanjeevani. He had to get some medicine. So he went. He flew, etc. So this is a powerful story. Now anybody who's read the Ramayana of Valmiki or Tulsi, it's a beautiful story. Now, can you fly in the air? Well, can Superman fly in the air? No, but it's believable in that context. And let's just look at the beauty of the Ramayana. The fact is there are hundreds of Ramayans, okay? So what I'm trying to say is there's no one text with one version of it. But the point I'm trying to make is that there are different levels and kinds of truths. So there is a historical truth, a chronological truth, a mathematical truth, but there is a spiritual truth also. And as a person with a spiritual belief, you could realize in your heart a particular truth which to someone else may not seem mathematical or historical. So if you take away myths, if you want to use that word, if you take away stories, if you take away fiction, I would say as a student of literature, Adityaji, fictions contain higher truths which histories do not contain. Just look at War and Peace, this great novel that Tolstoy wrote. And if you read the few pages that with beginning 100 pages, a character like Tolstoy, is the narrator, and he says, why I'm writing this story? I'm writing this story to find out the truth about the Napoleonic invasion of Russia. What really happened? How were we saved? And it's a fat book, 1,500 pages or something in translation. And at the end of it, what his theory of history is, Tolstoy's theory of history is? His theory of history is it's not what Napoleon did, it's not what our Tsar did, it's not the nobility, ye wo. He's actually saying that, human history, human events are so complex. You cannot pinpoint what happened, who did it. And he's actually saying it's providence. There's a bigger power. And Shakespeare says that in Hamlet, He says, if I remember right, there is a providence that shapes our ends, rough hew them, howsoever we may. So in our own lives, you'll see the unknown working at very critical junctures. So what I'm trying to say is if you take away stories, if you take away myths, if you take away things which are not supposedly literally true, then humanity would be so deeply impoverished. Our soul, our spirit would be starved. So let us celebrate those cultures which still have, mythology, if you want to use that word, which still have a plethora of stories. And India is the original home of stories. The Katha Sarit Sagara, the Panchatantra, the Dashakumara Charitra. So many stories, the Vetal stories. And these stories, Adityaji, they circulated all across the world in different garbs. In Greek, writings, ancient Greece, they were called Aesop's fables. The same stories of, let's say, those, the clever jackal, or the cat, the fighting, monkeys, and the cat as the adjudicator, whatever. All these stories that we know of and have read as children, most of these stories came out of India, and they went all around the world. And stories take on a different shape. I'll tell you one more little example, and then you'll see. I mean, then the audience will understand what I'm trying to say. That think about the idea of the Buddha. Okay, now the Buddha became a figure of great reverence because he was so compassionate, right? And this figure of the Buddha and the image of the Buddha started traveling around the world. And actually, they were quite far into the western parts, I mean, beyond India. Certainly, when the armies of Islam came to the borders of, what is now Pakistan, Makrana, Sindh, Baluchistan, those were Buddhist and Hindu, of course. So Buddha images were everywhere in that part of the world. Some people say Shiva images, Buddha images were all the way into Iraq and beyond. Anyhow, now these monks from China and other parts of the East, they were so thirsty for this knowledge. They were coming to India for the texts and for the knowledge, okay? And the traders were taking, these images and, the ideas, etc. And let's not forget there was no jet travel at that time. Everything was slow. It took a long time. So the concept, the idea of the Buddha, this great compassionate figure, started traveling and then through the mountains beyond India, maybe Afghanistan, the Silk Route, eventually, through Central Asia, it's making its way to China. And then what happens? By the time it reaches China, they say such a compassionate figure can't be a male. So Buddha has become a female. So the male figure of Buddha has become Guan Yin. So what I'm simply saying is that without the traveling tales from India and other parts of the world and how they change and who, as it were, cares what the historical Buddha was, whether he was male, a prince, this, that. The people who were enthused by the idea of Buddha said, no, he's so compassionate. He has to be a woman. So, what I'm trying to say is myths are very important, they're very powerful. We need myths to live by. And modern people who are supposed to be scientists or scientifically oriented, dependent on technology, I can tell you there is so much tribalism. There are so many myths of modernity, and some of them are so dangerous that to say that only Hindus and all these people with unripe cognition who haven't progressed have myths is, I think, what shall I say? It's not only an unfortunate and blatant misunderstanding, but I would think of it as a falsehood.
No, you put it so well, and I think you gave me the title of the video also, Myths of Modernity. And and while in your conversation just now, and see the when we talk to, so our audience, this Sattology channel's audience is mostly people who are coming to relish the sophistication of Mahabharata and Ramayana. If you look at Ramayana, uh, being a student of Sanskrit, I can read it. The Sanskrit of Ramayana is so simple, Valmiki Ramayana, and the Sanskrit of Mahabharata is like the sophisticated. And there is another text called Brahma Samhita, which was found in the Adi Keshar temple by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that is even higher version of sophistication. Just the fifth chapter is available. So now, when you look at these sophistication, then someone very intelligent has written them. Like where there's no grammatical mistakes. What you don't understand in one Sanskrit text, it comes up in the second one. And as you are thinking, the book is speaking to you, and especially Bhagavad Gita. So, what is the my question is, so this Ramayana Mahabharata, people, the Western people have more faith in them than even Indians right now. I mean, I would not generalize that also because India is a land of dharma. What is in them that attracts everyone?
What you said at the beginning of the question is really fascinating. And I think that can be a nice peg to hang this question of mythology on. See, the myths of modernity are that modernity is rational and that the ancients or the pagans, are, let's say, mythological. So the idea that the pagans have only myths and modern people have rationality is itself a myth. That's my point. So that the actuality is modern people have myths, ancient people also had myths, and modern people had science, ancient people also had science. The ideas of science have changed, the ideas of myths have changed. But I think you answered the question that when you say Ramayana and Mahabharata, these are incredibly as you said, not only sophisticated texts, but these are civilizational texts. So it is not likely, though we say Veda Vyasa or Valmiki, it is not likely, again, from a modern point of view, that one individual wrote them. In fact, there's enough evidence that they were compiled over a period of time, like 500 years, 600 years. So you have a core story like Jaya, and then through accretions, it it becomes a compendium, like an encyclopedia of everything that was ever known to humanity at that point of time. So this is an ancient, you might say, uh, repository of wisdom and ethics, of sociology, politics, science, statecraft, erotics. All the branches of human endeavor are already there. And talking about the Mahabharata, right in the middle of it, as it were, the two armies facing each other, and then you know there is this great dialogue of the Lord, and his friend. And imagine the Lord, God Himself being like your buddy, like your best buddy. Now, which other tradition has that familiarity? In how do Hindus worship? We have so many modes of worship, right? So you can have the loftiest idea of the transcendent God, and then God can also be like a child, like Balakrishna, playing. Because if the mother can see God in her child, that's the easiest way to connect to divinity. And then, if you're really a very, very, romantically inclined human being, if you can see God in your beloved, that's madhurya. That's actually the highest form of bhakti of Radha and Krishna. Anyhow, but Sakhya, which is, look, the Lord is my friend. So, imagine the amount of conversation, debates that these two are having. And in the end, which God is going to tell, his, disciple or devotee that, look, I have told you whatever I had to tell you. Now do what you think is right. Look at the freedom of that statement at the end of that great text called the Bhagavad Gita. So, what I'm trying to say is that a text like the Mahabharata, it's a magic box. You open it, any page, any part of it, any parva of the Mahabharata, it's just mind blowing. The other day, I was in a very important meeting in Bengaluru where we were celebrating a modern version of the Mahabharata it's called Parva, and it's by a very great Kannada writer called Mr. Bhairappa. Now, what Bhairappaji has done, because we talked about myths, I wanted to bring it up. He has purged the Mahabharata of any supernatural event, anything. Whether it's the birth of the Pandavas themselves when the deities come and, Kunti gets a boon. He has rationalized and humanized everything. So there's no miracle, there's no supernatural. Even Krishna is seen as a wise human being, okay? And I analyzed the text, and there was a big meeting. Over 1,000 people had come because it's like a modern classic in Kannada language. It sold hundreds of thousands of copies. And one of the most interesting things that came out, what the point I made, is that by, as it were, demythologizing the Mahabharata and modernizing and rationalizing it, in a very interesting way, Bhairappaji has re-mythologized it. It's not easy to understand, but in a way, what he's done is he's made the modern person get into this text by, he says, who are the devas? So he says the devas are people who used to live in the high altitudes of the Himalayas. They were very fair, strong, tall, and the plains people went there and they learned, all these arts which they didn't have. And, so that way he sort of tries to justify and rationalize everything. And then he uses modern psychology, like what is Kunti thinking? What is Draupadi thinking? What is Arjun thinking? But look at the end result. the end result is the text, which is the Mahabharata, becomes even more intriguing, even more fascinating, even more attractive. Its sophistications become even more impressive, even after you demythologize it. So, what I'm trying to say is, why are these texts so important? Because whichever way you look at them, they always come out, like a chamatkar. In Indian aesthetics, that chamatkar is the most important thing. Chamatkar is like almost like a miraculous sense of wow, adbhuta rasa. So, when you read the Bhagavad Puran, when you read the Ramayana, when you read the Mahabharata, the verse, the great energy that the composers who were like rishis put in the text. It's mantric. It's going to open you up. And maybe we are running out of time, but I want to just say one more thing on this topic. When I went to Egypt, I saw those pyramids, built 2000 years ago, 1800 years ago. And even today, it's astonishing how those people built those pyramids, and from what I know of Indian archaeology, history, etc., the Indus Valley people, which were somewhat at a similar time, though again, look, in Sattology as well as in our Puranas, our time scheme is totally different. So we won't go
Totally
into
different.
that.
Totally
That's but let's confine ourselves to the modern notion of history, carbon dating, archaeological remains, linguistic proof, philological data. Let's go and according to that, and you'll see Indus Valley is coming around the similar time of
different.
ancient Egypt and so forth, maybe a little later. But I began to think, I said, look, these guys, they build these huge, absolutely huge pyramids, and these were religious buildings, okay? And they were like spaceships. They were meant to transport the soul of the dead king, who was like a god king, to the other world, and yet bring them back. So one belief was their kings would come back to visit them, and that's why the tomb was so designed that it's supposed to be familiar even to a person who's crossed over to the other side. Okay, now I began to think about this, Aditya ji, very deeply, and then I realized, what our ancient Hindus did? They dematerialized the idea of liberation. The demat, as it were. They digitized it. Now, is a new thing, digitized. But what I'm trying to say is they built monuments in verse. They did not build monuments in stone. The great achievement of the Hindus was that everything they did, they preserved in language. The Vedas are an amazing composition in language. The Mahabharata, the Ramayana, all these texts. Now, what did they do even about immortality? What did the Egyptians do? The Egyptians said, look, we'll mummify the body, and maybe the we can revive this. The ancient people thought, the spirit world and the world of the living, the world of the dead, the world of the living, they're linked, okay? And somehow, if you mummify, if you preserve the body, maybe there can be a going back and forth, all right? The Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, I believe they got some of these ideas from the Egyptians. And so they bury their bodies, they make big tombs, Muslims make big tombs, and they believe there's a day of judgment when all of these dead people will be revived. What did the Hindus do? They said, forget the body. We are going to demat. So you burn the body. So there's no attachment to the body. But then what happens to that spirit or that Atma or the soul? So they created a mantric formula, what we call the Gayatri Mantra. So that is your spaceship. You have a mantric vehicle, you have a mantric shuttle, a mantric, whatever you want to call it, to take you from this world to the next. Now, why am I bringing this up? Mythology, you may call it, religious belief, doctrine, theology, whatever. But let me tell you, Aditya, without a theory of death, afterlife, salvation, liberation, whatever, immortality, there is no religion. Because as soon as human beings became conscious, one of the things they grappled with was the problem of death. And they began to ask, like, what happens? This living person, he was so wonderful, she was so beautiful, whatever it is, so enlightened, where are they gone? So to combat, to conquer, to overcome, to understand death is one of the only reasons that religions were invented, as it were. Therefore, what I'm simply trying to say is coming back to the Ramayana, Mahabharat, these great texts, it would not be an exaggeration to say that they can entertain you, they can enlighten you, but you know what? They can also teach you the secret of immortality if you could understand them. There is that golden door, the Hiranyagarbha. If you can open the golden door, then you may experience, as some people claim to have experienced this, that when we are living, we can experience that other state. And then whether we know what lies beyond or not, I can tell you one thing, Adityaji, we lose the fear of death, we lose the attachment to our body. I don't know about immortality. Let's not talk about it. But Hindus believe consciousness is eternal. The Bhagavad Gita says you change your bodies as you change your clothes. You know the beautiful verse, Vasansi Jirnani Yatha Vidhaya. So we believe that, Hindus believe that. But let's say you don't believe in it, at least you want to conquer the fear of death, the fear of unknown. And I think these books, if you read them, as you said rightly, they speak to you and they can awaken you in you that higher consciousness in which, like a samadhi experience, whether you are alive or dead, embodied or not embodied, you are charged with consciousness and the sense of being connected and in harmony with the cosmos.
Thank you so much. And you're a master in these topics, and you spoke uh, so well in detail in all these areas. Before I want to sign off on today's show, I would like to invite you again and continue on this series on smaller topics, more specific, smaller topics, so that people can get into more focus. I think today was more of an introduction where our audience got to know you and how eloquent you speak, and your clarity of your thoughts will bring more light into the many young lives who join this channel. So thank you so much. I know you have to go for a meeting, and so thank you so much, Professor Makarand Paranjape. And for my viewers, I'll send you the link. You can watch his institute in Shimla. He lives in a very beautiful place. It's one of the best places of India. And if you look at the Viceroy's building in Shimla, it's itself a tourist destination there. So he's runs that institute. So I'll send you all those pictures and the link and the work that he has done, the books he has published, and the authors of. He's a poet as well, and that you can make it out the way he was speaking to us. That the eloquence was just coming out. So that also I'm going to send you. And on behalf of the entire Sattology team, it's a huge team, and all the students, I'm just uh, the person who coined the term, but there's a whole community now. It is built up around it. Namaskar, Jai Shri Ram, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.